I was happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and man, some big news that may have some big implications on what we may do in this upcoming 2023 NFL draft, man. It's a lot going on. Of course, y'all know I keep y'all updated on all the prospect things. Make sure you stay tuned for that because we're now up to 89 confirmed prospects that we're interested in. So make sure you stay tuned because I will be uploading that hopefully within the next week. But today we're discussing the fact that assistant head coach / offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy went to Hendon Hooker, the quarterback, and Darnell Wright, the tackle, their pro days. Tennessee had a pro day a couple of days ago, and again, Eric Bieniemy made sure he personally went there. And that's the only confirmed pro day that I've seen that Eric Bieniemy has gone to. The Commanders have reportedly gone to 27 of them, and I've heard that GM Martin Mayhew went to a few of them. We also had Eric Stokes go to a couple of them. You have college scouts such as Chuck Cook that went to some. This is the only one that I know for a fact Eric Bieniemy definitely went to. So that's big news, man. If Eric Bieniemy went out of his way, that could be huge. Now, granted, it's not like Eric Bieniemy is coming in and completely running the show. He's obviously going to have a big say in what we do, especially on the offensive side of the ball in this upcoming draft, free agency, and all of that. But it's not like he overrides Ron Rivera, at least for now. But either way, this is huge, man. I mean, it's literally Ron Rivera, then Eric Bieniemy. As far as the chain of command, Eric Bieniemy has already skipped Jack Del Rio. So this is huge. So, of course, I want to dive into everything going on with Hendon Hooker, Darnell Wright, how they looked at their pro days and everything, all of the other teams that may be interested in taking those guys, what round we can get those guys, which takes me to my scenario situation. If we take one guy in the first, do something else in the second, get the other guy that we're talking about in this video in the third, and then maybe we can try to get another type of guy in the fourth. I'm telling you, this could end up being a really good draft. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately, and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you pull up every Sunday for the Commanders Call-In live show. Won't be able to do it this Sunday. I'm gonna try to be back the next Sunday. We'll see, but make sure you stay tuned because I will update y'all on when I will be having those live streams. I'll try to schedule them ahead of time so you know ahead of time, at least a day or two before. But stay tuned for everything draft, especially things like this, film sessions. I'm working on more mock drafts as well. A lot of content coming to y'all, so make sure y'all stay tuned. Without further ado, let's get it. Now, of course, when you go to Tennessee's pro day, you're not only just looking at the two people we're talking about today, Darnell Wright and Hendon Hooker. You also have wide receiver Jalen Hyatt. You have wide receiver Cedric Tillman and defensive line Byron Young, along with some other names, but those are the most notable ones. So Eric Bieniemy probably did his due diligence on those guys as well. You never know. But of course, the spotlight is on Hendon Hooker and Darnell Wright. And the reason that Eric Bieniemy will go out of his way to go to Tennessee's pro day himself out of his busy schedule, he said that he's been having all of the offensive guys coming in 7 a.m., all of the offensive coaches, and they're working 7 a.m. consistently. So for him to be that serious about gaining chemistry with all of the offensive coaches and getting everybody on the same page, for him to take a day off from that to go to this Tennessee pro day, that is pretty big. So don't be surprised if we end up with either Darnell Wright or Hendon Hooker or potentially both. Don't be surprised at all because that says a lot. It really does. Now, Darnell Wright, and we're going to get into this in the scenario part of this, of course, but Darnell Wright is projected to be a first, maybe second round pick, but I don't think he makes it that far. He's just too talented. And then you have Hendon Hooker, who before his really bad leg injury probably would have maybe even gone in the first round, but now it's projected that he'll make it maybe in the third, quite likely. Some people say maybe late second, but I definitely don't see it being the first. And again, most places I'm looking, a lot of people feel like he's more than likely going to go like in that third round range, along with my Georgia Bulldog Stetson Bennett, but more than likely before Stetson Bennett, with good reason. And of course, Chris Sims isn't just the super never misses guy, but he does do a lot of work on his film sessions and things like that, and position group rankings that he always comes out with: top quarterbacks, top wide receivers, top defensive linemen, top offense, all that type of stuff, every position group. And of course, as many of y'all may know, he has CJ Stroud number 1, Bryce Young number 2, and Hendon Hooker number 3 in his QB rankings. Then in tier 3, CJ Stroud is in tier 1 by himself, Bryce Young and Hendon Hooker are tier 2 together. Then tier 3 is Anthony Richardson, and then in tier 4 he has tied for 5th, but technically Dorian Thompson Robinson over Will Levis. So those are his top 6 quarterbacks. Again, he has Hendon Hooker third over Anthony Richardson, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and Will Levis. So he's clearly higher on Hendon Hooker and Dorian Thompson-Robinson than a lot of people are, especially a lot of media people. I'm not exactly sure about the NFL. I know the Commanders, they haven't shown any confirmed interest in a lot of quarterbacks. It's only like 3 or 4, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson is one of them, and he was the first one that we got confirmation about. So there's probably some clear interest there from the Commanders as well. If they can't get Hendon Hooker in, say, like the 3rd round, maybe they try to sneak in Dorian Thompson-Robinson in like the 4th or 5th. We'll see. But again, we're focusing on the fact that Hendon Hooker is the 3rd best quarterback according to Chris Sims. And it was definitely looking like this before the injury. And of course, because of the injury, a lot of people started to fall off on him, but you never know. And of course, Hendon Hooker at his pro day still recovering from his leg injury, the severe knee injury that he suffered towards the end of the college football season too. It was like November, which really sucks because he may not be healthy enough to play for whatever team drafts him before November type of thing. But it's expected to hit when he's drafted. He's not going to come in and start anyway. But he's like such a weird situation because he's not really a project quarterback. Like, he has a pretty high floor. He's already very technically refined. He reads the field well and things like that. He has some accuracy issues that he needs to work on, but he's a guy that comes in with a pretty high floor. So it's kind of weird to imagine him as like a later round project type of guy, but he's more than likely going to go later because of his leg injury. And then he doesn't also have that severely high ceiling that like an Anthony Richardson brings. So it's like a weird combination of things that makes it to where he probably will end up going in the 3rd round. And honestly, I mean, without the pedigree, traits wise, I mean, he looks very Deshaun Watson-y. Again, I'm not saying he's Deshaun Watson at all. Not saying that at all. But if we're talking about weaknesses and strengths, when you like say it out loud, it literally sounds like Deshaun Watson. Not the most athletic guy, not the strongest arm, but good enough for both. Pretty high floor, technically refined coming out of college. Now, of course, Deshaun Watson had a lot more accolades coming out of Clemson than Hendon Hooker has coming out of Tennessee, but he looked really good this season before he got hurt. And I'm sorry what my Georgia Bulldogs did to him, but that loss was not his fault, if anything. I mean, he was sitting in there, standing in that pocket and taking ridiculous hits all game. And I was just shocked that he didn't waver at all. Like, usually quarterbacks, after they get hit as much as he did, they tend to get a little fidgety, tend to make mistakes, throwing weird interceptions, trying to force things, throwing the ball too early, not reading the field, because you're like, I need to get this out of my hand. I prefer to throw this ball anywhere rather than get hit the way I've been. And he stood tall the entire time. So that's one thing you definitely don't have to worry about with him, is being fidgety in the pocket and wondering about pressure. But of course, again, like I just talked about with the knee injury that he has, he wasn't able to do any workouts at the pro day, but he was there cheering on everybody, man. Now, he did get in some practice throws with Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman, who I already talked about, who are coming out for this 2023 NFL draft along with Hendon Hooker and Darnell Wright from Tennessee. So before like the whole live throwing session, he did throw the ball to Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman a little bit, but he didn't participate in the full-blown pro day like everybody else did. I really hope Hendon Hooker can recover from his ACL as soon as possible, man. And it sucks that he had to suffer that, because I think if he could have finished the season strong for Tennessee, if people could have gotten a really good look at him at the combine and during that Tennessee pro day that just happened that Eric Bieniemy was at, I definitely feel like he would have gone in the 1st round easily. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that he would be the 3rd quarterback taken like Chris Sims says he's the 3rd best quarterback, but 1st round for sure. He's not making it out of the 1st round. So some team may end up getting lucky and getting a steal in Hendon Hooker later in the draft. Could that be us? And then, of course, you also have Darnell Wright, who a lot of people are really interested in, most notably the Commanders, of course. And not just because I'm a Commanders fan reporting on a Commanders situation, but we are really interested in Darnell Wright. We not only visited the pro day, and I'm pretty sure we got a really long look at Darnell Wright and are seriously considering taking him in the 1st round. But don't forget, we had a formal meeting with him at the combine, but he also either already came in for a private visit, a top 30 visit. Again, you're limited to 30 prospects that you can bring in for visits as an NFL organization. So every offseason, draft-wise, you can only bring in 30 prospects. And he's either already came in for a visit or he's scheduled to make a visit. It's been confirmed. So there's 3 confirmed strong references of interest from the Commanders on Darnell Wright. And if we're going by that list, again, look at the PDF that I have attached to this video, link in the description, and it's the pinned comment as well if you ever want access to it. And again, I'm gonna do a whole video breaking down the prospects list now that we already have like 89 guys. So stay tuned for that, like I already said in the intro. But he's one of only 4 people out of all of these 89 guys we have shown confirmed interest in that there are 3 reference points of interest. You have Osiris Torrance, the interior offensive lineman from Florida. You have DeJuan Jones, defensive tackle from Ohio State. And then also, of course, Darnell Wright. Again, we visited his pro day. We met formally with him at the combine. And he either came in for a top 30 private visit already, or he will be soon. But we're not the only ones that are bringing him in for a visit. The Atlanta Falcons, the Denver Broncos, Cincinnati Bengals, Las Vegas Raiders, Arizona Cardinals, Detroit Lions, Indianapolis Colts, Kansas City Chiefs, Jacksonville Jaguars, Tennessee Titans, and Baltimore Ravens are all bringing him in for visits as well. So this is a busy man, and it sounds like his stock is only going up and up every week. A lot of people say that he's the strongest offensive lineman in this draft class. And of course, you can never forget the fact that Will Anderson said out of his collegiate career, Darnell Wright was the most difficult tackle he went against. That was like his worst game he ever had. Darnell Wright literally shut him down. My problem with Darnell Wright is that he plays to his level of competition. When he goes against a guy like Will Anderson, who is arguably, depends on who you talk to, the best player in this entire draft, he steps up and plays to the level of an offensive tackle that can lock a guy down like that. And go look at the tape, he did. But then when Tennessee is going against random lesser schools lower than Alabama, he just plays down to that competition and he starts making weird mistakes that he wasn't even making against Will Anderson. It's so weird. So if we're talking about a ball of clay, a level of potential, what they look like on their best day, and you're hoping as a coach you can just coach consistency rather than trying to, you know how much harder it is to coach a trait in the player that they haven't shown compared to just coaching that person to do what they've already done but more consistently and all the time. That's a way easier coaching job. And of course, as a coach, an offensive lines coach and an offensive coordinator, head coach, you feel like you're the smartest guy on the planet and you feel like you can take a Darnell Wright and do such a thing. And there's a world where Darnell Wright could end up being the best offensive lineman from this draft class. It's not very likely because there's a lot of really good tackles in this class. There's a lot of really good interior offensive linemen. But at the very least, one thing you can't take away from him is that there's a strong argument that when he's at his best, at the very least, his best game looks better than anybody else's best game. And you can also say he's probably the strongest offensive lineman in this class, at the very least the strongest tackle in this class. And again, you can work with that. Now, of course, there's some hip things that we may want to work on, some fluidity, you want to work on some footwork, things like that as well. He can't just go out to the second level and block a linebacker or a DB as well as Paris Johnson Jr. He's not as fast as a Broderick Jones. He's not as technically refined as a Peter Skoronski. But hey, man, Darnell Wright, me personally, Rico Street Scores, not mad at all. Because again, at his best, you can argue is the best tackle in this class. You just need to get that out of him consistently. Now, going back to Hendon Hooker for a little while, the reason I didn't mention how much the Commanders are interested in him is because the only connection we have to Hendon Hooker so far is that we visited Tennessee's pro day. We didn't talk to him at the combine, formally or informally, at like the Senior Bowl, nothing. There's no evidence of us showing confirmed interest in Hendon Hooker other than the fact that Eric Bieniemy went to Tennessee's pro day, and I've already talked about how us drafting Hendon Hooker later in the draft, third round at the very earliest, maybe even later, makes a lot of sense for us. I literally included that in a mock draft I did a couple of months ago, and why it made so much sense for Eric Bieniemy to want to come in and bring his own quarterback that he can work on behind Sam Howell. Sam Howell, he loves him, he loves what he's seen from him, but it's not his guy. Eric Bieniemy didn't draft Sam Howell. I hope Sam Howell works out. I hope he's a top quarterback, and I actually have a really good feeling that he can be. But Ron Rivera's already said, even during the NFL owners meetings and things like that, that they want to have 3 quarterbacks on this roster. They got the veteran in Jacoby Brissett, so you probably have 2 young guys, a Sam Howell, your starter, of course, and then break glass in case of emergency, Jacoby Brissett comes in, and then Hendon Hooker. For some reason, if Sam Howell doesn't work out, you at least have Hendon Hooker, who you're working on for the future. Jacoby Brissett is not the future. He's the now, if in case something happens. Hendon Hooker will be the future in case something happens. But I really do believe in Sam Howell, honestly. I'm not going to lie. But again, back to my main point. Even though we went to the pro day where Hendon Hooker was at, first of all, he didn't do anything there that Eric Bieniemy could really take away anything from, unless he like just went and talked to him personally on the side or something like that. But it's not like we went to Tennessee's pro day for Hendon Hooker. At least there's no evidence to confirm that at all. Because again, there's strong interest in Darnell Wright. Obvious confirmed interest in Darnell Wright. So Eric Bieniemy probably went for Darnell Wright and Hendon Hooker just happened to be there. So who knows how much we're interested in Hendon Hooker, if at all. But there's confirmed interest in Darnell Wright. So if there were one guy that you had to pick between the two that you can bet that we would end up taking in this draft, is Darnell Wright over Hendon Hooker any day. Again, formal combine, private visit, flying him out to Ashburn. And again, I feel like he was the main reason Eric Bieniemy went to that pro day. Now, it would have been really noteworthy if like Mayhew went, Ron Rivera went, and Eric Bieniemy went, because then it sounds like, okay, if all of these guys are going, this sounds like a strong first round pick candidate. And we'll see how it goes. I mean, honestly, going to the scenario point now, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people want to hear, is that I feel like a lot of the top corners that we want will probably be gone in the first round by the time we pick at 16, like Christian Gonzalez, Devon Witherspoon, maybe even Emmanuel Forbes, potentially gone before that 16th overall pick. And with as deep as this class is at corner, where you could potentially get a starter, a really good starter in the third round with a straight face, like Julius Brents, who as of right now is projected to go late first, early second round. The cornerback out of Kansas State, we've shown strong interest in him. We met with him informally at the Senior Bowl and then still met formally with him at the Combine afterwards. Like, nah, we got to talk to this guy twice. So you never know. Maybe we try to get Julius Brents in the second, which takes me to the scenario. First round, Darnell Wright, obviously, to fit the scenario, and I think it's very likely. Even John Com talked about it in his live stream where everybody was throwing a whole bunch of questions. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you go check that out, because he talked about a lot of really interesting things, like the Commanders tried to trade for Kyler Murray and then settled on Carson Wentz. I mean, it's a lot of stuff like that. That's like, wow, like I'm about to go watch that for a second time type of thing. But he basically said that based on what he's heard and how he feels about players, this is all his opinion, not necessarily like a reporter or anything, but he just feels like tackle makes the most sense because this cornerback draft is so deep that the guy that you would get in the second or third round isn't that much worse than the guy you would get in the first at all. And so the value there is obviously to get a corner in the second or third, especially if your top guys like Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon are gone and you love a lot of guys, you really like a lot of guys, but they aren't your top two like those guys. If they're gone, then just wait to take one in the second. And again, it's obvious that they really like Julius Brents as a potential Benjamin St-Juste clone, maybe in the second round. So I have us going Darnell Wright in the first, 16th overall, and then in the second round taking cornerback Julius Brents, because I do really feel like they like him. Now, if he happens to go before then, I can easily see them going Osiris Torrance, interior offensive lineman from Florida, but that's another discussion for another day. Again, to stick with this one scenario, we're not about to sit here all day. First round, Darnell Wright. Second round, Julius Brents, the corner. Then the third round, you go ahead and take your quarterback in Hendon Hooker. You don't chance it. And remember, this is kind of a free pick. It's a compensatory pick that we got for Brandon Sheriff leaving. So, I mean, it's a pick. It's a pick that works, a pick that you take a player with. So it's technically not like you could just throw it away like it's nothing and pick any old body. But I could easily see them going Hendon Hooker in the third with that comp pick. And then maybe they take interior offensive lineman Alex Forsyth from Oregon, who they've shown strong interest in as well. They've had a formal meeting with them at the Combine. They met with them informally somewhere else. They're bringing them in for a top 30 visit. And they visited Oregon's pro day. He's the only player out of all 89 players that the Commanders have confirmed interest in so far that they've had 4 reference points of interest, 4 interactions with them. Again, formal meeting at Combine, met informally with them before then, somewhere, a private top 30 visit and a pro day. Of course, they more than likely went to Oregon's pro day to really get a good look at Christian Gonzalez, but they probably also did a really good study of Alex Forsyth while they were there as well. So if you want to say just based off of the numbers, Alex Forsyth from Oregon is the guy that they're most interested in out of this entire draft so far, just based on how many times they've shown interest in him in different ways. So I see him going in the 4th round, very possible. Some people consider him a late 4th round, early 5th round pick potentially. So that's very realistic to be able to snatch him up then, and maybe you're bringing him in to compete for the starting left guard spot. I mean, Ron Rivera said it's between Sadiq Charles and Chris Paul, and I love Sadiq Charles. I love his talent. I love his potential. I love what I saw from him against the Cowboys, and Sadiq Charles has talent. He just can't stay healthy. But if we're going into the regular season assuming that one of those two guys is our starter, I'm scared. I'm not gonna lie. I like the rest of the offensive line quite a bit. I love Samuel Cosmi at right guard, and I feel like Charles Leno gets a little bit too much hate at left tackle, and I really like Andrew Wiley at right tackle. And if Chase Roullier can stay healthy at center, we're cooking. Now, there are quite a few ifs in there, but obviously, with it being Chris Paul versus Sadiq Charles as of right now, and notice that he didn't mention Andrew Norwell in that scenario at all, which sounds like he's more than likely going to end up getting cut or something to free up some cap space at some point. Just a little interesting tidbit right there. But hey, man, maybe you bring in Alex Forsyth to compete for that starting left guard spot, and then you never know. Maybe he's your potential starting center of the future that you're grooming behind Chase Roullier, Tyler Larson, and Nick Gates in the meantime. And then you also never know. Nick Gates could be competing for guard, but Ron Rivera specifically did not mention him as far as left guard goes. They look at him more so as a backup center. So right now we just have 3 centers and 2 guards. So you bring in Alex Forsythe, who could play either one, can compete for either one in the 4th round, and that's huge right there. And then speaking of Charles Leno, if we draft Darnell Wright in the 1st round, because I know some people are probably thinking, okay, so what happens to the offensive line? Whose place does he take? Well, according to John Com in that long live stream again, it sounds like the Commanders really like Andrew Wiley, and if anything, Charles Leno would be the one that ends up getting cut at left tackle. Darnell Wright becomes your starting left tackle of the future. And hopefully, I mean, we went from Chris Samuels to Trent Williams. We had an ugly gap in between, but again, Charles Leno gets a little bit more hate than he deserves. And then Darnell Wright could be that next potential Pro Bowl, All-Pro, hopefully Hall of Famer left tackle of the future for the Commanders. We were spoiled for a very long time, going from Chris Samuels and then a year gap, and then Trent Williams came in. We were super spoiled. We didn't know how good we had it, and hopefully we can recreate that with Darnell Wright. I'm not saying he's going to automatically be a Hall of Fame level player, but if we're talking about potential, Darnell Wright at the very least has it in him. You can say that. But again, going back to Charles Leno, that means he's the odd man out. John Com even said that when in doubt, if they were to draft a tackle in the 1st round and expect that guy to start at tackle, especially like left tackle specifically, Charles Leno was going to go. They really like Andrew Wiley at right tackle. They love Samuel Cosmi at right guard. So Charles Leno would get cut. And just to let you know, if they would have cut Charles Leno, that would save us $8 million worth of cap space right now. Like literally right now, the day that we do it. And that's quite likely because remember, after the draft, the Bears cut Charles Leno after they drafted a tackle. And then that's how we ended up getting him after the draft. And then history could repeat itself with Charles Leno getting cut by us after we draft Darnell Wright in the draft. So, and again, we would save $8 million. And as of right now, we don't even have enough cap space to sign our rookie draft class right now. So we're going to have to make some moves to make that happen. Andrew Norwell will probably happen. Maybe restructure Chase Roulier and or Logan Thomas to make that happen right now. But maybe after the draft, you free up another $8 million releasing Charles Leno because you drafted Darnell Wright. And then maybe you take some of that $8 million to put it towards re-signing Cameron Curl long term. I'm just running down a whole long scenario and how this could end up working out very well for the Commanders. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. How you feel about Eric Bieniemy attending Tennessee's Pro Day. Which players do you feel like he had his eye on the most? I would say Darnell Wright, but don't rule out Hendon Hooker or maybe even those receivers that were there as well. Also, let me know how you feel about my scenario with who we take in those first 4 rounds and why. Do you agree with that? Do you like it? Do you hate it? What would you change? And of course, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors. Name you see scrolling on the screen right now. Again, leave a like on this video if you liked it. If you learned anything, it's free for y'all and it means the world to me. So please do so if you can. And I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.